We believed we had found ultimate control by stripping our lives bare, living only with what served a direct and immediate purpose. But the unexpected chime of our doorbell was about to expose the terrifying cost of our carefully constructed freedom. The hum of the fridge was the loudest sound in the house. That, and the gentle clinking of my wine glass as I set it down on the bare floor beside me. Mark and I were sitting on two simple wooden dining chairs in the middle of what used to be our cozy, cluttered living room, watching a movie on a laptop propped up on a cardboard box. It wasn't exactly the romantic Friday night we were used to, but it was peaceful, orderly, exactly as it was supposed to be. The old life, the one with the plush sectional sofa and the overflowing bookshelves and the gallery wall of mismatched frames, felt like a distant, chaotic memory. This was better. This was control. Then the doorbell rang, a sharp, intrusive sound that sliced through our quiet bubble. Mark and I exchanged a look, not the casual, "Who could that be?" glance, but a flash of pure, unadulterated panic. We weren't expecting anyone. We never expected anyone anymore. That was part of the point. He paused the movie, plunging the room into an even deeper silence. The bell rang again, more insistent this time. "Maybe they'll go away," I whispered, my heart starting to thud against my ribs. "No, there's a car in the drive," Mark whispered back, craning his neck to see through the window. "A rental. Oh no." I knew what "oh no" meant. There was only one person in our lives who would rent a car and show up on our doorstep at 9 o'clock on a Friday night without so much as a warning text. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. The box, the chairs, the walls. There was no time to fix it, no way to hide it. We were caught. I pasted on the brightest smile I could manage and opened the door. And there she was, my mother, beaming under the porch light, a rolling suitcase in one hand and a reusable grocery bag full of what I knew would be home-baked scones and unsolicited advice in the other. "Surprise!" she chirped, her arms wide open. I had some extra vacation days I had to use up, and I thought, why not spend the weekend with my favorite daughter and son-in-law? I hugged her, the familiar scent of her floral perfume filling my senses and making my stomach twist into a knot. "Mom, what a surprise. You should have told us you were coming. And ruin the fun. Never," she said, bustling past me into the entryway. Mark gave her a polite, if somewhat stiff, hug. "Mark, you look tired, dear. Are you two eating properly?" She didn't wait for an answer. She dropped her bags, kicked off her shoes, and walked straight into the living room. And then she stopped, dead in her tracks. The cheerful whirlwind energy that always surrounded her just evaporated. Her smile faltered, then vanished completely. Her eyes, wide and confused, darted around the cavernous, empty space. She took in the two lonely chairs, the laptop on the box, the bare white walls with their faint, ghostly outlines of where our pictures used to hang. She looked at the empty alcove where the TV stand had been, the naked floor where our favorite Persian rug had once tied the whole room together. Her head swiveled back to me, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. Her hand flew to her mouth, her knuckles white. "Oh, honey," she breathed, her voice a shaky whisper. "Oh my God, you were robbed." She took a staggering step forward, her eyes scanning for more damage, for signs of a struggle. "Did they hurt you? Are you okay? When did this happen? Why didn't you call me?" Her questions came out in a frantic rush, her mind clearly painting a picture of masked intruders and ransacked rooms. She looked at me and Mark, at our calm, still faces, and her brow furrowed in deeper confusion. "Sweetheart, we have to call the police. You can't just let them get away with this," she insisted, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and pity. She thought we were in shock. She thought we were traumatized, too ashamed or scared to tell her that our whole life had been stolen from us. Mark took a step forward, his expression unreadable. His voice, when he spoke, was unnervingly calm, cutting through my mother's rising hysteria. "We weren't robbed, Diane." My mom stared at him, then back at me, desperate for an explanation that made sense. Her eyes pleaded with me. "Then what? What is all this? Where is everything? Your furniture? The paintings your grandmother gave you? What happened here?" I took a deep breath, the air feeling thin and sharp in my lungs. I met her gaze, trying to project a sense of calm I didn't feel. This wasn't how we wanted her to find out. We had a plan, a script for this conversation, but it was for a planned visit, over coffee, not a surprise ambush in our empty life. "No, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We weren't robbed. We're just following the rules." My mother stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. The words hung in the air, heavy and nonsensical. "Rules?" she repeated, her voice cracking. "What rules? What on earth are you talking about, Sarah?" "It's a new way of living, Mom," Mark said, stepping closer to me, a quiet show of solidarity. He spoke with a frustratingly level tone, the kind one uses to explain a complex board game to a child. "It's called the principle of intent. We're learning to live intentionally." "Intentionally?" she scoffed, gesturing wildly at the empty room. "You call this intentional? It looks like you're squatting in your own home. Where is your life?" "This is our life," I insisted, my own voice firmer than I expected. The old life wasn't ours. It was just an accumulation of things, distractions, material anchors holding us down. I was parroting the words from the seminars, the phrases that had become our mantra. They sounded so clear and powerful in the lecture hall, but hearing them come out of my own mouth in front of my bewildered mother, they suddenly felt flimsy. Mark took over, seeing me falter. "We attended a weekend retreat a few months ago, Diane, with a life strategist, Julian Vance. He taught us that every object we own has a psychic weight. It takes up mental space. It demands our attention. It creates unintentional emotional responses. The sofa, for example. We didn't choose to sit on it every night. We did it out of habit. It dictated our evenings. So we removed it." My mother sank onto one of the hard wooden chairs, the one I had just been sitting on. She looked small and frail in the vast emptiness. "You got rid of your sofa because it had psychic weight?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. "And the TV? And the rug I bought you for your wedding? And what about the paintings? The ones your grandmother painted herself? Did they have psychic weight too?" Her voice broke on the last sentence, and a wave of guilt washed over me. I remembered packing them up. Mark had been ruthless, logical. "They serve no practical function, Sarah. They only exist to evoke nostalgia, which is an unintentional emotion rooted in the past." I had cried as I wrapped them in bubble wrap, but I'd told myself it was just the detachment process, a necessary pain like pulling a tooth. "Mom, it's not about not loving Grandma," I said gently. "It's about choosing to live in the present. We evaluated every item in the house. We asked one question: does this serve a direct and immediate purpose in the life we are intentionally building? If the answer was no, it had to go." "Go where?" she demanded, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and fear. "Did you sell everything? Your beautiful things? Selling implies attachment to monetary value, Mark corrected her smoothly. We donated them. The principle teaches that the act of release is more important than the reward. My mom just stared at us, shaking her head slowly. The pity in her eyes was gone, replaced by a cold terror. She wasn't looking at a daughter and son-in-law who had been robbed. She was looking at two strangers, two members of a cult. He brainwashed you, she whispered. This Julian Vance character. He took your home, your memories. He's taken my daughter. No, Mom, he's given us clarity, I protested, the defensiveness rising in my voice. You have no idea how stressful it was maintaining all that stuff. We were drowning. Now we're free. We have a system. We have a schedule. Everything has a purpose. There's no more chaos. She stood up, her face a mask of resolve. She walked slowly around the room, her footsteps echoing on the bare floorboards. She ran a hand along the empty wall where our wedding photos used to hang. Finally, she stopped in front of us, her gaze intense and piercing. She looked from me to Mark, then down at our hands. I see, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Everything has to have a purpose. Everything is just a distraction. So tell me, she said, pointing a trembling finger at my left hand. What about those? Aren't they just objects? Sentimental trinkets from the past, designed to evoke unintentional emotions? She locked her eyes on mine. What's the direct and immediate purpose of your wedding rings? I opened my mouth to respond, to tell her that some things were different, that they were symbols. But Mark spoke first, his voice as calm and steady as a flat line. We evaluate them at the end of each fiscal quarter, he said. The next assessment is in 3 weeks. My mother's face went white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking fragile and older than I'd ever seen her. The look she gave Mark wasn't just fear or anger anymore. It was pure, unadulterated loathing. She looked at him as if he were a monster who had not only stolen her daughter's furniture, but her soul. You assess your marriage? Quarterly? She whispered, the words catching in her throat. It's about intentional partnership, Diane, Mark said, completely missing the horror in her tone. Or maybe he just didn't care. We evaluate if our union is still serving its intended purpose of mutual growth and efficiency. Emotion-based attachment is unstable. A data-driven approach is far more reliable. That was it. Something inside my mother snapped. No, she said, her voice ringing with a sudden, steely authority. No more. I'm not listening to another word of this psychobabble. She turned her back on Mark, her focus entirely on me. She walked over and took my hands in hers. Her skin was warm and real against my own, which suddenly felt cold and clammy. Sarah, listen to me, she said, her eyes boring into mine. Forget the furniture. Forget the paintings. Do you remember when you were little? You had that stuffed rabbit, Patches? You loved him so much his ears fell off and I had to sew them back on with dental floss. He served no purpose. He was just a dusty, lopsided toy. But you wouldn't sleep without him. You told me he kept the nightmares away. Is that what this is? Are you having nightmares? Her words hit me like a physical blow. The memory of that rabbit, the feel of his worn-out fur, the smell of my childhood bedroom. It all came flooding back in a dizzying, emotional rush. An unintentional emotion, rooted in the past. It was exactly what Julian Vance had warned us against, but it didn't feel like a distraction. It felt like me. We don't have nightmares, Mark interjected coldly from behind her. Our sleep cycles are optimized for maximum restfulness. My mother ignored him. Look at yourself, honey. You're pale. You're thin. You're talking like some kind of robot. Is this really making you happy? This empty room? This efficient partnership?" I looked around the cavernous space. For the first time, it didn't look peaceful or controlled. It looked sterile. It looked like a hospital waiting room. It looked lonely. I thought of the quarterly assessment. The idea, which had seemed so logical and advanced in the seminar, now felt clinical and terrifying. Was our love for each other just another line item on a spreadsheet to be reviewed and potentially discarded for failing to meet its KPIs? Tears welled in my eyes. I thought it was, I stammered, the carefully constructed walls of my new life beginning to crumble. It was supposed to be simpler, easier. Life isn't easy, Sarah. It's messy and complicated and full of useless, beautiful things. That's the whole point, my mom said, her voice softening. She squeezed my hands. "Come home with me. Just for the weekend. We'll bake scones that serve no purpose other than to taste good, and we'll look at old photo albums full of inefficient memories. Just come back to yourself." "She's not going anywhere," Mark said. His voice had an edge now. "This is an unscheduled emotional intrusion. You need to leave, Diane." He took a step towards my mother, and I felt a jolt of protective anger so fierce it stole my breath. I stepped between them, turning to face my husband. For the first time in months, I wasn't seeing my partner in intentional living. I was seeing a stranger whose eyes were cold and whose logic had become a cage. "No, Mark," I said, my own voice shaking but firm. "She's right. I've been having nightmares, every single night." The lie came easily because it felt like the truth. This whole life had become a waking nightmare of stark white walls and hollow-hearted efficiency. I looked down at my left hand at the simple gold band on my finger. It wasn't a data point. It was a promise. It was the memory of a nervous boy fumbling with a ring box, the feel of his hand in mine at the altar, the weight of a shared future. It was a mess of nostalgia and love and hope, all the things we had tried to purge. I pulled the ring off my finger. It felt strangely light. I held it out to him, not on the palm of my hand, but between my thumb and forefinger, as if it were a specimen for analysis. "Here," I said, my voice clear and steady. "You can start your quarterly assessment early. This item no longer serves its direct and immediate purpose, because its purpose was to remind me of the man I married, and he is nowhere in this room." Mark stared at the ring, then at me, his face a blank canvas of confusion. For the first time, the system had failed him. There was no protocol for this. I didn't wait for his response. I turned, took my mother's hand, and walked out of the empty house, leaving the door wide open behind me. The cool night air felt like a baptism. I didn't know where I was going, not really. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was finally going home.